The envelope arrived on a Thursday morning at 6:47 a.m., slipped under the door of the servants' quarters at the back of the Mensa Adeyemi estate on Banana Island before the cook had lit the stove. It was a white envelope, standard business size, with a typewritten name on the front and no return address. The name was Nkechi Okafor, not Mrs. Okafor, who had been cleaning the main house for 11 years. Just Nkechi. The girl. Nkechi was 22 years old. She was not yet awake when the envelope arrived. She found it when she opened the door at 6:51 a.m. to go fetch water for her mother's morning bath, and she stood in the doorway in her housecoat with the cold Lagos air on her feet and looked at her own name on the front of it for a long time before she bent down and picked it up. She did not open it immediately. She knew, the way you know certain things before anyone tells you. What kind of letter arrives in a white envelope with a typewritten name on a Thursday morning before the sun has fully risen? She pressed it flat against her chest with both hands. Then she went inside and sat on the edge of her cot and opened it. Inside was a single page. At the top, in bold letters, was the name of a law firm she recognized from documents she had seen on Chief Mensa Adeyemi's desk when she helped her mother clean his study on the second Tuesday of every month. Below the firm's name was a number, 2 million, and below that, 4 short paragraphs in legal language that she read 3 times to be certain she was reading them correctly. She was. The letter said she had 7 days to vacate the premises. It said her mother's employment contract had been terminated effective immediately, with the stated month's severance and no additional compensation. It said any further contact with any member of the Mensa Adeyemi household by either party would be treated as trespass. And it said that the enclosed bank draft, she found it at the bottom of the envelope, a pale green slip, represented a full and final settlement, which, once cashed, would constitute acceptance of all terms. She set the letter on her knee. She pressed both hands flat on her thighs. She sat that way for 4 minutes without moving. Then she got up, put the kettle on, and woke her mother. Chioma Okafor was 48 years old, and she had worked in the Mensa Adeyemi household since Nkechi was 11, first as a laundrywoman, then as the household manager, then as the position that had no title but carried the weight of 3, the woman who ensured the house ran precisely, who knew where the spare generator keys were kept, and which flowers the chief's late mother had preferred at Easter, and exactly how many minutes it took to iron a linen shirt so it would hold its lines through a 12-hour board meeting. She had done all of this for $85,000 a month. She had done it without complaint. She had done it while raising her daughter in 2 rooms behind the main house, feeding her, clothing her in pressed school uniforms, walking her to the gate each morning, and waiting at the gate each afternoon. 12 years without missing a single day, unless one of them was ill. Chioma was short and broad, and smelled of the camphor soap she had used every morning, since her own mother gave it to her in Enugu at the age of 14. Packed in a cloth bag with her other things when she left for the city. She wore her hair close-cropped now, the gray coming through the black, in careful, even lines that she said were her accounting. 1 gray line for every hard year. There were 14. Her hands, which were large for her frame, looked like they had not stopped working since 1991. They had not. When Nkechi handed her the letter, Chioma read it standing up. She did not sit down. She read it once, very carefully, put it back in the envelope, and set the envelope on the small table beside the gas ring, where the kettle was beginning to hiss. Then she took 2 enamel cups from the shelf and made tea. She had known this letter would come for 3 weeks. She had not told Nkechi. The reason the letter had come at all was a boy named Tobena. Tobena Mensa Adeyemi, 25 years old, second son of Chief Emeka Mensa Adeyemi, who had built his first commercial property in 1994 with a loan that took 6 years to repay, and had spent the 32 years since turning that one property into a portfolio that now included 14 commercial developments, 2 hotels, a logistics company, and a stake in a private hospital in Ikoyi. Tobena had come home from London in April after 3 years studying economics at UCL. He had come home with a degree, a slightly different way of carrying himself, and the particular quality of attention that certain young men acquire when they have been away from home long enough to stop seeing their own house the way they were taught to see it. He had noticed Nkechi on his 3rd day back, not in the way his father's friends would have noticed her, not as furniture, not as a service. He had noticed her the way you notice someone when they do something so precise and so unself-conscious that it pulls your attention before you have decided to give it. She had been refolding a stack of napkins that the cook had folded incorrectly, and she was doing it the way her mother had taught her. Each fold deliberate, each corner aligned, the whole stack squared before she moved on. She did not know he was watching. She would have folded them the same way if she had known. They had talked for the first time on a Wednesday evening in May, on the back terrace, when both of them had arrived at the same time to watch the electrical storm coming across the water. They had stood 8 feet apart and said nothing for several minutes. Then he had said, "Do you always watch storms?" And she had said, "Only the ones that look like they mean it." They had talked for 1 hour and 40 minutes that night. By the end of June, they had talked many more times and were talking differently, with the specific directness of 2 people who have decided, without announcing it, that they are not going to pretend. And Nkechi had not sought this. She had her mother's sense of where the lines were drawn in that house, who occupied which side of them, and what it cost to cross. But Tobena was not performing when he spoke to her. He was not testing something or proving a point. He was simply, and this was the thing she kept returning to, the thing she could not dismiss. He was simply interested in what she thought, in how she saw things, in the way she read the storm. She had not told her mother until July. Kayama had listened to the whole thing without interrupting. Then she had set down her cup and said, "The chief will not allow it." Not because she wanted to say it, because she knew it the way she knew where the generator keys were. It was simply a fact of the house. Chief Emeka Mensa Adiemi had learned about the situation on a Saturday in September at 3:14 p.m. when he received a message from his household manager, not Chioma, but the man who managed the household accounts, informing him that his son Tobena had been seen with the laundry woman's daughter on the back terrace at night for the 4th time in a week. The chief was in his study when he received the message. He was there for a while afterward, and he did not speak to anyone. He did not speak to Tobena that day. He did not speak to Kayoma that day. He did what men of his particular construction do when they decide that a problem is structural rather than personal. He called the law firm. If this story is reaching inside you the way I think it is, stay with it, because what Nkechi does with a $2 million bank draft in 7 days is not what any of them expected. On the morning the envelope arrived, Tobena was in his room on the 2nd floor of the main house and did not know it had been sent. He found out 4 hours later when Nkechi came to the main house door, not the back entrance, not the kitchen side, the main door, the one with the brass fittings and the carved wooden frame, and rang the bell at 11 o'clock in the morning. She was wearing a dark blue dress with a white collar, the one she had bought secondhand on Lagos main island for $4,500, pressed the night before. She had her mother's Bible under her left arm and the white envelope in her right hand. Tobena opened the door himself because the housekeeper had not yet reached it. He saw her face before he saw the envelope. He had known her long enough to know the difference between how her face looked when she was managing something and how it looked when she had decided something. This was the second. She handed him the envelope. He read the letter in the doorway. His face did not change much, a tightening around the eyes, a stillness in the jaw. He handed it back. He said, "I didn't know about this." She said, "I know." He said, "Let me talk to him." She said, "No." He looked at her. She said, "I'm not here for that. I need to speak to him directly." Cabina looked at her for a moment longer. Then he stepped back from the door and let her through. She had spent 3 of the 7 days writing. Not drafting. She was not the kind of person who needed 7 versions to find the truth of a thing. She had spent 1 evening writing and 2 days checking. The zoning variance had been filed on the 14th of March, 2021. The correct filing window had closed on the 7th of March, 2021. 7 days. She had found this because the planning application was cross-referenced in a folder of correspondence that Chief Mensa Adeyemi kept in the 3rd drawer of the left cabinet in his study, the one her mother had been instructed to dust, but not to open. Her mother had never opened it. Chioma had been in that house for 11 years and had never once crossed a line she had not been invited across. But Chioma had taught her daughter to read everything, including the things at the edges of a page. And sometimes the edges of a cabinet tell you something too. The other 4 days she had spent sitting with her mother at the small table in the servants' quarters, drinking tea made strong with evaporated milk, because that was how Chioma's mother had made it in Enugu. And they did not talk much about the letter. They talked about other things, about whether the mango tree at the back wall had enough water, about a story Chioma had heard from the cook, about a family in Lekki, about the way the light came off the water in the early morning when the harmattan was pulling back and the sky went that particular shade of clean blue that only lasted a few weeks before the heat came again. On the 4th evening, Chioma had said, without looking up from her cup, "Whatever you are planning, do it standing up." That was all. Nkechi had not replied. They both understood the conversation was finished. The chief's household accountant, a man named Gerald, who wore short-sleeved shirts and kept the estate's operating budget in a leather-bound book he never set down, had been the one to tell the chief about Nkechi's arrival at the main door. Gerald had called up on the house intercom at 11:02 a.m. The chief had said he was not available. Gerald had said, "She is carrying the letter, sir, the one from the firm." And something else. There had been a pause on the line. The chief had said, "Send her to the back entrance." Gerald had relayed this to Nkechi. She had said, without raising her voice, "No." Gerald had stood in the corridor for a moment looking at her, the leather-bound book under his arm. Then he had gone back to the intercom. She had waited 9 minutes in the entrance hall before Gerald returned and said, without meeting her eyes, 5 minutes. She walked into the study and took 8. Chief Mensa Adeyemi was in his study when Nkechi walked in. She had not been invited. She had not knocked a second time after the first knock went unanswered. She entered, closed the door behind her, and stood at the edge of the carpet that began in the center of the room. A large Persian rug, deep red with gold threading, that he had bought in London in 2003 for a figure she had once heard mentioned and had never forgotten. She did not step onto the carpet. She stood at its border. She set the envelope on the edge of his desk. She set the bank draft beside it, unendorsed. Then she set a second document beside both of them, a letter of her own, 3 pages, handwritten in her precise and careful script on sheets of A4 paper. The chief looked at the documents on his desk. He looked at her. He had not expected her to come at all. He had certainly not expected her to come like this, standing straight, hands at her sides, nothing in her expression that asked for anything. He said, "You should not be in here. You sent a letter to my room before sunrise," she said. "I thought that established the terms." He was quiet for a moment. He had built 14 commercial developments. He was not a man who was often caught without a response. He said, "You have 7 days." "I know," she said. "I'd like to use one of them for this conversation." He sat back in his chair. There was a clock on the wall to his left, a mahogany case, gold face, that ticked loudly enough to be the only sound in the room for a moment. He looked at the 3 pages she had placed on his desk. He did not pick them up. She said, "The 3rd page is about the hospital." He was very still. "What hospital?" "The one in Ikoyi," she said. "The private hospital, in the joint venture." "I know about the zoning variance. I know when it was filed and who filed it, and what the correct filing date should have been. I know, because I have been my mother's daughter in this house for 11 years, and your filing cabinet is in the room she cleans on the 2nd Tuesday of every month, and documents talk to careful people the same way storms do." She paused. "I am not here to threaten you. I want you to understand that. I am here because you sent my mother a termination letter after 11 years of service that she gave without fault, and I would like you to read what I wrote before you decide that the matter is closed." The chief did not speak for 40 seconds. The clock ticked. Then he picked up the 3 pages. She stood where she was while he read. She did not move to the chair. She did not shift her weight. She had learned a long time ago, watching her mother manage the difficult geometry of that house, that there were moments when stillness was the only thing that could not be taken from you. He finished reading. He set the pages down with the same care she had placed them, not dropping them, setting them. He looked at her for a long time. Then he said, "How old are you?" 22, she said. "Your mother knows you are here?" "My mother is making tea," she said. "She does that when she has already decided what comes next and is waiting for the rest of the world to catch up." Something crossed his face then, not softness exactly, but a fracture in the particular certainty with which men like him occupy their chairs. He looked at the unendorsed bank draft on his desk. He looked at the letter. He looked at her standing at the edge of his carpet. "What do you want?" he said. She had been waiting for that question, not with impatience, with the same precision her mother brought to a linen shirt. She wanted 3 things. She stated them in order. First, her mother's full reinstatement, with a written contract, an actual contract, with terms, not an arrangement, and a salary reflecting 11 years of service at the rate the household accounts justified. She knew what those accounts justified, because the documents talked to careful people. Second, a letter from the law firm withdrawing the Thursday envelope, addressed to her mother by her full name, Mrs. Chioma Okafor, not the laundry woman, not the housekeeper, her name. Third, she would need 6 months, and a letter of professional reference on the firm's letterhead, because she was leaving regardless, not because she was pushed, but because she had been accepted to read law at the University of Lagos and she had deferred once already, and she was not going to defer again. She did not mention Tabena. She did not need to. The chief sat in his chair for a long time after she finished. The clock on the wall ticked. A boat horn came faintly across the water from the direction of the Lagos harbor. "Finally," he said, "the zoning variance." He said it like a statement, not a question. "I have no interest in it," she said. "I never did. I mentioned it so you would take the conversation seriously." "Which you have." He looked at her. He said, "You would have made a very good lawyer." She said, "I know." She left the study the same way she had entered it. She pulled the door closed behind her carefully, not slamming it, not letting it drift, closing it the way her mother had taught her to close the chief's study door on the 2nd Tuesday of every month, with both hands on the handle, the latch meeting its socket without a sound. Tobena was in the corridor. He had been there, she understood, for some time. He looked at her. She looked at him. There was something in his face that she recognized, the expression of a person who has just watched someone they cared about do something they had not known that person was capable of, and found that it had shifted the coordinates of what they had believed. She did not stop walking. She said, as she passed, "Your father makes decisions. So do I." The legal letter withdrawing the Thursday envelope arrived by courier the following Monday at 9:22 a.m. It was addressed to Mrs. Chioma Okafor. Chioma read it standing at the kitchen table. She folded it precisely in thirds, placed it in her Bible beside the paper prayer she had written for her daughter in 2009, when Kechi started secondary school, and went to begin her morning work. The written contract arrived the Tuesday after. The salary it specified was $190,000 per month, more than double what Chioma had been paid for the previous 11 years. Chioma signed it. She did not comment on the number. She folded the copy she was given and placed it in the same Bible. Nkechi began her first year of law at the University of Lagos in January. 4 months later, she took the bus to campus from the Okafor family flat they had moved into on the 4th, a 2-bedroom place on the 3rd floor of a building on Lagos main island, $420,000 a year rent, which Chioma's new salary covered precisely, with $68,000 left over each month. Nkechi carried her notebooks in a bag her mother had given her, a dark green canvas bag with a long strap that Chioma had bought at Makola Market in Accra years earlier, on one of her 2 trips across the border, before Nkechi was born. She had kept it all those years. It still smelled faintly of the market, palm oil and printed cotton, and something like rain on a tin roof. Nkechi carried it every day. She never put it down carelessly. She graduated 5 years later, in December, 3rd in her class. Her thesis, on contractual enforceability of informal domestic employment arrangements under Nigerian labor law, was cited 4 times in the following 18 months in legal journals. The first citation was in a law review published by the firm whose letterhead had appeared on the Thursday morning envelope. She did not notice this immediately. When she did, she sat with it for a moment, and then she moved on. There was no point lingering. The work had already done what it was going to do. Chief Emeka Mensa Adeyemi attended her call to bar ceremony. He came alone, without announcement, and sat in the 4th row. He left before the reception. He did not speak to her that day. But 2 weeks later, a letter arrived at her chambers. She had taken a position at a litigation firm in Ikoyi, 3 blocks from the private hospital, and the letter was on plain paper, no firm letterhead, handwritten. It said that he had read her thesis. It said that she had been right about the zoning variance, and that the matter had been resolved in the way it should have been resolved from the beginning. It said nothing about Tobena, who had returned to London and was building something of his own there, and whom she thought of occasionally the way you think of a storm, that it looked like it meant it, with appreciation and without regret. The letter ended with one sentence: "Your mother raised someone the world had not finished accounting for. So did mine once. I should have recognized it sooner." She placed the letter in her desk drawer. She did not frame it or answer it. She kept it because it was true, and because truth is one of those things that does not improve with decoration. Chief Mensa Adeyemi thought he was closing a door on a Thursday morning before sunrise. He sent the envelope before the cook had lit the stove. He had the law firm's letterhead, and the bank draft, and the typewritten name, and he had built 14 commercial developments, and he believed that all of these things together constituted a conclusion. He was wrong about the conclusion. He was right that it was the end of something. But the thing that ended on that Thursday morning was not the story of Chioma and Nkechi Okafor. It was the last morning of the particular power he had over them, because Nkechi walked into his study and did not step onto his carpet, and set 3 pages on his desk, and declined to cash his draft, and in doing so made a different kind of document, the kind that cannot be sealed or withdrawn or hand-delivered before sunrise. You cannot end a person with an envelope. You can try. You can have it typewritten on the letterhead of a firm that costs more per hour than some people make in a month. You can specify 7 days. You can have the bank draft ready, pale green and precise, because you have always believed that every negotiation has a number. But there are people who already know what their number is. And it is not the one you wrote. The ones who raise their daughters in 2 rooms behind the main house, pressing school uniforms at 5 in the morning and waiting at the gate every afternoon. They are not doing that because they have no choice. They are doing it because they have decided what they are building. You do not always see it from the front of the house. You do not see it at all until the Thursday morning, when the daughter you never looked at directly comes through the main door with your own envelope in her hand and stands at the edge of your carpet and tells you quietly and completely exactly what she knows. What would you have done with those 3 pages? If you had written them, if you had spent 11 years learning a house from the inside, learning every document in every cabinet, every term in every arrangement, carrying all of it without complaint, waiting for the one moment when it would matter, would you have walked through that main door, or would the weight of everything you had been told about which side of the carpet was yours have been too heavy to cross? Leave your answer in the comments. I really want to read it. Subscribe for more stories about hidden strength, quiet power, and the people the world overlooks until they change everything. I'll see you in the next one.